This is how we start off our shows. Okay, we start off on the left side. And we go hodl, hodl, hodl. Save, save, save. Build a, build a, build a. Sound money, sound money. All right, this is Ugly Old Goat here. And we're going to be doing a read through on my article, Bitcoin Centralization. But we also have a special guest today, which I've just recently met. And we've been having quite a quality. It's like, where have you been? Because we seem to be of one mind on so many things. So I want to just have you introduce yourself, Aaron, who you are, and we'll go from there. I want to cover your article that I just read because I have been persuaded this last year that I've always kind of worked Bitcoin from the top down, but I've said, you know what, I want to start doing it from the bottom up. And you wrote an article that just hit a home run with me. So can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm an economist and a political scientist. Also, I graduated my bachelor's degree is in mathematics, my master's in economics. That's where I met in my master's degree in Georgia Southern University. I had an Austrian professor that introduced me to Hayek, to Mises, to Menger, and to Rothbard. So from then on, I've been fascinated with the Austrian school, and I use a lot of mathematics on top of that. I'm an odd Austrian, but I'm still a very passionate Austrian economist. And I'm starting my doctorate degree from the University Francisco Marroquin, Campus Madrid. And what else can I tell you guys? I teach economics in Texas. I was raised in Mexico. That's why you guys can hear my accent. It's a little bit different. But now I was born in Texas, raised in Mexico, Monterrey, and now I live in the United States. But obviously, since Texas and northern Mexico are almost like one nation, at least culturally speaking, I go back and forth all the time. And I'm also the economist from the Libertarian Christian Institute, where my article is from. So I usually write from there, and you guys can find me on Twitter talking about econ, mainly monetary economics, and once in a while a little bit of libertarian theory.
Okay. Yeah, and this is where I'm so glad we met because, I want to start developing Bitcoin here locally in Ensenada. And I have this facility. I think the opportunity for Bitcoin is really at the border, number one. And Jimmy G was actually one that persuaded me. He says it's unique. It's not like El Salvador. If you go to El Salvador, you say, well, why do we need Bitcoin? We already have the dollar. Whereas on the border, people understand there's the dollar and there's the peso, and if you give them a choice, they almost always want the dollar. So just the next step, say, well, okay, there's peso and there's dollar, and now you have Bitcoin, which is better than the dollar. So it's kind of an easier lesson to teach. It's maybe lower hanging fruit than even El Salvador is.
Yeah, yeah. The general pattern is, and Hayek got it out of this situation. He was in Austria, if I'm correct, um, but he was living in a border town, and then he was noticing that in border towns, usually they take more than one type of money. So that's where he looked at it and he said, you know what, this could be everywhere. And then he started early '70s saying, they should get rid of like legal tender laws and things like that, so that people can choose. And what he was thinking about at the beginning was competition among fiat monies. If you live in Spain, why not have German use German currency, German money, together with the one locally, and so on and so forth. Later on, that's when he says, why can't we do this privately? And then later on, the cyberpunks picked up the idea, and then Bitcoin came along, so on and so forth. We can discuss that history a little bit more because there's MacLoop also behind that. which is super interesting, and he doesn't get that much attention, by the way.
Well, you know
So
what? Let's go to your article. Can you pull up his article first because I really think it's more relevant. My article is more dealing with the situation with FTX and the terrible banking that we have in Bitcoin now, which is really just exchange banking and is not
uh,
sound at all.
you know how FTX, the main issue among many, right, was that he signs, the owner signs um, s- a custodial contract for him to store and take care of the assets as if he was 100% reserve banking, but he still use it. And that's usually my complaint to my friends that are 100% reservers, to say, just because you have 100%, you have no assurances that there's going to be no problem, because they can just break the contract. I mean, that's pretty much it. The problem is not fractional reserve or 100% reserve. The problem is whether they're going to comply with the contract, and whether you as a customer, whether it's a fractional reserve or 100% reserve, uh, the question is that counterparty actually trustworthy? And that's really the key behind everything.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit, even before we go into the articles, because just tweeted with Nick Carter. He's getting ready to, who I admire Nick. I like him a lot, even though he's been, he's kind of disavowed maximalism. I've done that a long time ago. I'm a Bitcoin standard bearer. Most of my friends they identify as Bitcoin maximalists, but I don't like the opposition to defend who I am. So that's why I'm a Bitcoin standard bearer. But yeah, this whole proof, he's going to do an article on proof of reserves. And to me, it's kind of a non issue. And I think you kind of have the same view. I mean, how do you prove reserves? Because it's really not the quantity. I mean, FTX was fully reserved as FTT shitcoin. It had several 100% reserve. They were never financially insecure, according to their own bookkeeping.
No, in their case, this is where it gets tricky. That's a good. Let's say you deposited any other coin, not just Bitcoin. You deposited Bitcoin in FTX. I always get confused with FFT or something. And the contract says, when this is not ours, this is yours. We're just only taking care of it. That's it. The way we make money is on transactions, so on and so forth. But he said, forget about it. He signed the contract, says, customers, don't worry about it. This is going to be here. We're not going to touch it. We're not going to lend it out. And the guy just did it anyway. So it is the trustworthiness of the now the reserves. I'm not super conversant on the proof of reserves, but my best guess is that they
what they did, they valued, they of course would sell the Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever it was, and then they would revalue everything in their own FTT.
Okay, but let's say you put Bitcoin in FTX, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of keeping it there, they give it to Alameda, whatever.
Right.
It's possible to know that it was given to somebody else. Like,
well, I think they sold. I think they actually sold it. They said, well, here, their reserve, was being held in their FTT and their own token, which was, of course, a worthless token that was.
That one was
right. So I mean,
it's bad accounting and everything.
Like, bad accounting. The whole thing was a scam.
On top of it,
right? And it's just amazing that it slipped by, everybody. And not everybody. A lot of people called it, but.
Okay, but the proof of reserves supposedly is gonna let us know if we deposit an exchange, let's say Coinbase, and Coinbase, instead of keeping it, they give it to somebody else. Will the proof of reserve, I think, that Nick and you are guys trying to deal with, it's supposed to be a technology or a process in which it would let you know that they don't have it anymore?
I don't know. That's what he's writing an article about it, so I'm waiting to see.
It's not clear.
Yeah, it's not clear what he's talking about. But I don't think that there is any such thing as proof of reserve. But it's like what you wrote in some of your articles. It's not the quantity, it's the quality. And this is what sound commercial banking is all about. How are you going to measure the quality?
That's the tricky part. For example, what happened, I'm still going to use FTX just for right now, so we use it as point of reference. FTX promises that it's not going to be a bank. It says, I'm a warehouse that is going to make exchanges for you.
And
I'm
make
gonna
money
keep
for it.
everything.
Now, how they're going to be a warehouse and make money, that should have all kinds of red flags on that one.
To be fair, some of them survive that way. Some of the exchanges are not well known, and I guess that's why they're not well known, because they're trying to be as honest as possible. They just make money on the transactions. They get a little bit of a, it's minimum, and they're gonna make, you know,
Yeah,
a
that's
couple of
Swan.
$1 million.
Swan is that way. Swan, Corey Klippstein, who is also the recipient of the 2021 Bitcoin standard bearer, because he is running a sound exchange. He doesn't even let you sell Bitcoin, which is probably not a bad idea at this point, because since we don't have banking, Bitcoin is really something you just hodl. It's the function. The trick is, how do we create it as money? How is it tradable, as you say? I love that word that you use, tradable.
I love that one. Yeah, I was like, I have to figure it. I have to figure. And it's okay. Let's call it tradable, and people get it. That's which I was happily surprised that people are getting the idea. Oh, it's the most tradable. Now, right now that we don't have, now there's still some financial institutions that would take your Bitcoin and pay you interest as a typical on-demand deposit, and say, look, I'm going to pay you interest. You can come pick it up whenever you want. But if you don't pick it up, you earn more interest. I have some friends that were making good money by leaving their Bitcoin in, I think it was Celsius or places like that. I mean, it's not the only one, but several places like that. You give them your Bitcoin. They either lend it out, they use it for leverage, whatever it is that they're going to do. Well, the contract says this belongs to you, therefore you pay me interest. That's what the customer. So real quick.
Well, he's got my article up here first, so we'll go through my article real quick. Then I want to go through your article, okay?
Nice.
Because I do read throughs, and I call this Bitcoin's decentralized reserves, and I'm amazed at how few people really understand this. And so I'm always doubtful. Well, maybe I'm the one that's wrong. And so I really, if I'm wrong on this thing, please correct me. But how the HODL will lead to sound commercial banking. And basically, my view has always been, hey, the HODL is the reserve of last resort. It is the banker of last resort, and hodlers will be rewarded by sound bankers, because they'll be able to buy things, things that they couldn't previously purchase, because they've been hodling, and this bank doesn't need reserves. It just needs to have a sound banking principle, because it can always go into the market to buy the reserves necessary, whether the price is at $1 million.
From the hodlers.
Right, from the hodlers.
From hodlers.
Right.
And a good price.
At a good
what
price.
I usually would say, the idea is, if the commercial bank that has Bitcoin as unit of account and as reserves or possible reserves, if it's short on reserves because he has a lot of withdrawals or something, is going to take its high quality loans, sell it to a hodler, and the hodler is going to get it at a good price. And this is the interesting thing. Things like commercial paper, short-term, high-quality paper, during crisis, instead of going down on price like every other financial asset, because everybody wants base money, actually, there's one of the few ones that go up in value.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, that's why I'm very passionate. So let's say you buy commercial paper, it promises, let's say, 2 Bitcoins plus 5%. Halfway through it, there's a crisis. You're trying to sell it you're trying to sell it to get some base money. In this case, it will be Bitcoin, let's say. What the hodl does, usually most of the people that are holding some type of base money are gonna say, oh, that's actually pretty high quality. That's super high quality paper. I'll take it and I'll charge you, let's say, less. Instead of the 5%, I'll charge you a little bit less. So the paper itself is actually more valuable, and they don't have to wait until the end of the period. So during crisis, as long as it's short term, very tradable, and high quality secure, usually during the crisis they go up in value. I mean, up to the limit, right? But they actually
I get it. It makes sense. And of course, I'm a student of the marketplace, but I didn't really think of it. But you're absolutely right on that one.
The other one is, historically speaking, short-term commercial paper has been a medium of exchange, a medium of payment for large transactions. So when the commercial bank that you deposit has mostly, it doesn't have to have only commercial paper, but it has mostly commercial paper,
Right.
you know that if there's a crisis, that bank is going to do well.
Now, if you're wondering what we're talking about, commercial paper, my mentor is E.T. Harwood, and he wrote a treatise way back in the 70s called The Lost Art of Commercial Banking. And it really describes now he doesn't say self-liquidating commercial paper, but that's what he's describing. And
Okay.
yeah, and and he also addresses the 100% reservists. And
Yeah,
so
usually the way we call it instead of self-liquidating, because some people were getting confused about it, like if nothing happened, is short-term, high-quality borrower. Because the borrower is the one that's going to pay you either with money or with goods, but it's going to pay you.
right.
So
And
we
it's
usually say,
secured with those goods. That's the whole.
exact,
It is
yeah.
secure. It's more than 100% backed. It's just not backed
Yes.
in kind. That's the thing. It's a
There you go.
that's it. And it's short term. Like the commercial paper is usually 30 days, 90 days, maybe at the most 120 days. That's it. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
working capital is because the connection there for a little bit of a teaching of if anyone wants to learn a little bit of finance and econ, a typical company would have something that is called working capital, which is base money. Let's say if they have any cash or something like that, but also the goods and services and loans that they have made that they can quickly convert into cash within a year. So all of that, including inventories, a flow of inventories, not just inventories, but a flow, because it's not just, at moment, it's the whole year flow of inventories. If they made some type of loan, because companies sometimes make loans to other companies, and the cash that they have, all of that we call the working capital. Any kind of asset, either physical or financial, that can be converted to cash within a year, most financial markets are going to take it as if it was near, if not money, near money.
right.
That's how Mac looks
and
at it.
this is used, people, if you don't understand, it's used to pay suppliers, to pay your help. It's for operating expenses. And as E.T. Harwood explained it, it's not inflationary. You're creating money, but it's not inflationary because you're not creating it ex nihilo. You're not creating it out of nothing. You create it estimating the value of those goods in relationship to the standard that you use. Now, that standard, the base money standard, could be gold or it could be Bitcoin or either one or both. And that's why I also then bring up one of my other heroes, and that's Richard Timberlake. He's since passed shortly after he wrote this book where he describes the real bill doctrine. And he actually outlines how the real bills doctrine also does, by itself, it doesn't work. What makes the real bills work is no reserves, and that it has to be, but it has to be redeemable into a base money. Of course, he uses gold because this was before Bitcoin. So this is what he talks about. And he actually says. Uh, right here, the important principle here is no matter how invalid the real bills doctrine is in its role as a basis for creating the right quantity of money, the system's higher ranking commitment to an operational gold standard completely overrides any weakness in the doctrine. And, his point is that they work together. You have to have the redeemability and you have to have the
Yes.
real bills doctrine. And because without if one of them breaks, then the real bills doctrine is subject to self-feeding inflation or a deflationary loop, while the standard base money becomes a simple warehouse operation, and that doesn't meet the needs of an industrial society.
The way I describe it, going back to Hayek before, like his prelude of what he was going to write in the 70s was in the pure theory of capital. He was discussing, hey guys, be careful with this. Usually, money is the most liquid good, the most tradable good. He says that. But even in was in the 40s, I think, that's when he was writing Pure Theory of Capital. He was saying there are other goods that they're not money, obviously, but they're very liquid. They're very tradable. Why? Because they're producing goods and services that are also very tradable, such as consumer goods, maybe some electronics that people buy and sell every single month without exception. Things that people buy on a daily basis. or even monthly, weekly basis that are very related to usually the seasonal changes. Maybe in the winter, they're not going to be the same goods, but and in the summer. But the point is that there's always some flow of goods that people are using a lot. So the point is, there's going to be a lot of financial assets that represent or that finance that process. Those ones are also liquid. So we got to be careful to say, oh, money is liquid and everything else is illiquid. And so no, that doesn't work that way. There are actually levels of liquidity. Later on, MacLoop catches up on that, and then he says, well, there's a kind of like a moneyness to it. And then later, Hayek picks up again the word moneyness. He said, oh, look, remember what I was telling you? There's MacLoop himself uses the term either near money or moneyness to say that the different levels. So as long as banks lend in a way that is short term, usually people would take. So that has that very high moneyness. Although it's a loan, it's going to be paid in such a short amount of time, and it's producing goods and services that everybody wants. So we are going to recover quickly whatever loan you whatever loan you make.
Not inflationary in the fact that
No.
because it's retired. And it's also tied to the underlying security, to the underlying redeemability. So it's limited that way. If the price of gold goes up in relationship to the wealth, the loan is going to be for a smaller amount, or vice versa.
And another one that it was important on this one is, it's not inflationary for two reasons. Let's say two impacts. If the bank, maybe the loan is good, but the bank is not well known, as soon as they give, let's say they make the bank makes a loan and gives notes, banking money to the company so that they can do their operations. If the bank is not well known, that new money, banking money that came into the system is quickly come back for redemption the same day at the clearinghouse. So it's not inflationary. If the bank is not well known, it's going to come back right away, because the other banks are going to say, I don't want to keep your notes. I want you to give me base money, Bitcoin or gold or whatever the base money is. If it's very well known, that money is going to stay in, but it's only going to stay in the 3 months. Why? Because commercial paper is always limited to, it's always a short term. Money goes in, and as soon as, and even if it stays long, because everybody trusts the bank, it has to come back to the bank at some point. That is not very long, because the loan itself is going to be paid back within 3 months, even let's say a year. So there are two ways in which it's not inflationary. Money goes in and then comes back, either for redeemability, which is super important, or let's say for some reason it's not, a lot of people just want to hold to it. Well, the company itself, by making sales, is going to retire some money out of circulation and then pay back the loan. And so there's going to be less money in circulation when the loan ends. So it's powerful in two ways.
Aaron, I'm going to do a plug right now because you're on my show. I'm going to send you my 2 books. I just wrote this last year, How to Put Yourself on the Bitcoin Standard in One Easy Lesson. Of course, that is a reflection of Henry Hazlitt, because I don't consider myself a scholarly economist. He was sort of a self-taught economist. And the reason I want to bring this book up right now is, in here, I outlined and showed there's actually evidence showing what you're saying, and that was the old free banking days, where there were literally thousands of these private banks. And of course, the wildcat banks that were fraudulent, they had all this paper issued that was worthless, kind of like shitcoins. So people put them in their attics, and they're interesting pieces now that are worth a little bit. But the really rare numismatic pieces are the thousands. 99% of the banks were sound, and they retired their notes. So there are very few of those around. From all the
there you go.
Yeah, and so we actually have, when people say, oh, well, that was a wildcat bank error. No, those banks were very sound. Try and find a banknote from a sound bank. You can't.
The ones that were wild, and the one that has done great work on this is Selgin, is the ones that you can consider wildcats, that they were making a mess. They were usually because the specific state had a legislation saying you can create notes, but it has to be my debt, the one that finances.
Exactly.
And then that debt goes down, then obviously the value
Well,
of those notes go down. But not every single bank had such a low quality garbage assets. They had other assets, and the best example we tend to use are either whatever happened in Scotland or in Canada. That in there they didn't have any legislation says you're just gonna make a loans whatever you think is appropriate. And what was the typical asset that a banks will keep or they will lend their money to? It will be to usually short-term, high-quality commercial paper.
Back in 1980s, E.C. Horwood suggested that a tontine agreement be set up, a tontine insurance program, but with the gold as its backing. I don't know if you know what a tontine insurance is. It's where everybody puts in so much gold. You take an age of 100, and it gets distributed every quarter for retirement. And when you die, then the proceeds goes to what's left. So the last guy standing gets the most. It's basically to take care of you during your retirement. As you get older, your retirement increases because the other people have died off, and you're living off of their savings. So I actually looked into doing that, and that was perfectly legal to do in the state of Missouri. But of course, you had to hold about 20 or 30. Most of your reserves had to be held in state bonds.
Yeah, that's the problem that a lot of
insurance companies all have that. Oh yeah, they all do, because part of the game is, oh yeah, we'll register you, but you got to hold our state bonds.
Yeah, exactly. You have to finance us.
Yeah, right. And so that's the problem. So anyway, we're going to finish this article. Then I want to get to your article. But here's what this really hit a home run with me. Money is the most tradable good, not the most valuable good. Exactly. And so that's the challenge that Bitcoin has really have now. And so
I did that because the way that Bitcoin was discussed, and whether people notice or not, it was that since on a daily basis, the only asset that we're concerned with is getting some money so we can just buy tacos or hamburgers or whatever. Whenever someone tells you, "Hey, this is a good asset," what people tend to say is, "Oh, this is just as good as money," or they say this is money. And we were trying to say, guys, that's not what we're talking about. You guys are talking about, for example, they were overemphasizing the store of value function. And Larry White has done a great job on trying to, guys, the store of value function is just saying that something is an asset. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to it beyond that. The importance of what makes money special is that first and foremost, it's a medium of exchange. People can make payments with it. Like you work at X time and you want to consume at Y time later on. So what do you keep in between, so that you know that you can quickly exchange it, so that you get a medium of exchange. Now, what makes money special is that the medium of exchange that is generally accepted in some community where you quickly get your stuff, that's what makes money special. Store of value, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's so many assets that store value for good or for bad, that saying something is store of value, it doesn't make Bitcoin special. The point is Bitcoin going to be tradable enough so that people can get it, and whenever they need something without even thinking about it, can they just go buy something with it? That's what we call money. That people don't have to think it's Danny Fernandez, a great economist. He teaches at a University of Francisco Marroquín in Guatemala. He was saying that we need automatic schemes so that we don't have to be overthinking every single time. Unit of account, it's an automatic scheme. We don't have to overthink back and forth. We just say, how much is this worth? And our point of comparison is whatever was the unit of account. Generally accepted medium of exchange is, I need to get an asset that I don't have to be overthinking, like, okay, no, I'm hungry, I need to go buy something. How am I going to get it? No, you don't think about it. So, I'm hungry, let me go buy something, and you just have it already before time.
And
you don't have to overthink.
Yeah, I think the attempt now is to do that by making Satoshi the unit of account. I wanted to make 100 Satoshi called the standard. Hayek actually wrote an article, and he called it, this new money, this new private money is going to be, and he coined the term for it, the standard. He wrote that in a 1985 article. I don't know if I sent. I'm sure it's in the link of some of those articles I sent you, but that's kind of what he called it. But that's not the market's going to decide, and the market's kind of deciding this new unit of account is going to be satoshis, and so 100 satoshis right now is about 1.7 cents. So, and that seems to be the way we're going on that. Well, I'm going to kind of end this here, but basically my conclusion is that hodlers are the reserve and bank of last resort in a free market in a free market sound commercial banking.
You probably want to say hodlers are the value investors, the ones that during the expansion store cash, and then if there's a dip, they're the ones ready to buy assets at a low price.
Exactly, and that's probably a better way. That's why I'm so glad I met you, because you're one of the few people that, man, I just hit it off as, and you weren't even aware of E.C. Harwood, but you definitely understand what sound commercial banking is, and that's just there's so few of us out there, even in the Bitcoiners, that most of them are Rothbardians. You well know.
I'm a Rothbardian politically, if you wish, but
right, and I understand that, but I don't know if you realize I called Rothbard when I read his book a gold socialist. Oh,
I tell my friends that. My friends are 100% telling
that. Angel, can we go to his article now? Because I really want you to expound on this concept that you had.
And we do want to overemphasize this. The point is there's nothing wrong with the bank lending money. If you're a hodler and you're holding to base Bitcoin, if there's a crisis, you're gonna be the one that comes and saves the day. If there's no crisis, then that's fine. You have the money safe. But if there's a crisis, you're the one that's
right. And the crisis could be isolated in just certain areas too.
Yes, that happens a lot.
Yeah,
very common.
That's what happened back there when we had free banking. So.
Oh, okay. You know what? It's good that I show this example because it came on. Highly recommended to follow Dr. Lawrence White. He was one of the first ones to write about free banking, and he was describing in Scotland, where Adam Smith himself was writing about this. By the way. You have about 3 or 4 banks. There's 2 or 3 main ones. The Air Bank, that was the bank that Adam Smith himself was invested on, collapses because he makes some terrible loans. And the other banks, in order to prevent the crisis, come along and say, look, the notes of the Air Bank right now, they're worthless, but we're going to take them at face value. Open an account with us. So everyone holding notes from a defaulted bankrupt bank got their notes at full face value just for taking their business to the sound banks. So sound banks survive and save the day, and bad banks collapse and they go out of circulation. And that's it. And now we have higher quality loans, higher quality structural production, and higher quality money. I can speak bad about Messi right now.
Well, I just keep it. Not notice. Cursing in Spanish is much more effective than in English, So you definitely.
Well, for religious reasons, I don't like to curse. But usually, when I hear my students, my bilingual students, curse in English, I literally tell them, if you're gonna curse, you better use it in Spanish. We have more variety of words. It's actually a little more fun than
it's a lot more fun, and I don't use them either. But well, that's the other bonus that I had is when I found out that you're a Christian. I said, "Wow, is this amazing or what?" So, shared a lot of my mentors. Like I say, John Robbins has had a huge impact on me, and I never really thought that, economics actually can be deduced from scripture.
There are some passages, that we usually use about I forgot to send you the Libertarian Christian Institute, we went to Freedom Fest in the summer, and we had a panel, and there were a lot of questions and so on and so forth. And
is that in New Hampshire? Is that Pork Fest or Freedom?
No, Freedom Fest in Vegas was last time.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
This summer. And the organizer was, I use his stuff a lot, by the way. He's very strongly Hungarian. Mark Skousen.
Oh, okay.
He's the organizer of that one.
Okay. Well, I've known, Mark knows me from way back when.
Oh, that's nice.
He didn't like me back then because I called everybody a gold socialist.
No, but he's not 100%er, as far as I remember.
Pardon?
He's not 100%er as far as I
Well,
remember.
he probably isn't there. He probably was back then,
Yeah, no.
and uh, he's Mormon
And
too. Incidentally, I don't know if you knew that.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
We know him really well,
Okay.
and we get along with that community.
Okay.
I was gonna tell you the way that I emphasized it was that Christians and the whole world, we have the duty to God to take care of its creation. It is the property of God, and He has given it to us. So inflation is sending us a signal that we're not taking care of God's creation, of the limited resources they give us, instead of um, using them for human development. We're overusing them, and therefore prices start to shoot up because we don't have enough relative to what we're demanding. So we're not properly taking care of God's creation. So I'll try to send you the link to that one.
Yeah, that sounds
people did
interesting.
like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I want to cover now this article, which really hit a home run with me. Incidentally, your one you did on the Russian ruble really was fascinating to me too. I discussed that with you, but I didn't know all the pieces that were going on over there.
It was super difficult. My mentor, Juan Ramon Rayo, he did a lot of research on this because he has a YouTube channel. He publishes and all that kind of stuff. He did it wasn't easy to make sense of the whole thing. It was not easy to make sense because there were some things that looked good and then some of things that looked kind of shady. So it was hard to actually. That's why we wrote the article, because I know that for general public, even for economists, it was going to be hard to make sense.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what
I
I wrote with the material I had was accurate, but then here's another side that I didn't see, and so there's actually two parts to it, and it doesn't mean that Russia cannot redeem itself from this thing, but I
mean, everyone can redeem itself. I hope.
Sure.
The U.S. And the U.S. and Russia, both of them redeemed themselves.
Yeah. Well, just look at me. So I want to go.
There you go.
I want to look at this article because this hit a home run with me. And you know what? I introduced you as Aaron because I cannot pronounce your last name. It's linguistically impossible.
Sepúlveda.
So yeah, Angel has no problem saying it's Sepúlveda.
Hey, you're from California, isn't it?
No, I'm actually from Kansas.
So, there you go. In California, well, in LA, everyone of any type of linguistic background can pronounce my last name because there's one of the main streets in LA happens to be Sepúlveda. Obviously, nobody outside of LA and northern Mexico can pronounce my last name because it's just too long, but it's Sepúlveda.
And then that's not really the way we look at it in English. That's your middle name, and then your mother's name is that Quay. Okay. Sepúlveda Quay. Aaron Sepúlveda Quay.
Yeah, that's not too bad at all. There you go.
Well, I'm kind of tongue tied. So, but this article is so good, and the importance of the community and the creation of money. And you know what? I've really been persuaded of that, particularly what we've seen from the last year. And my whole thing in Bitcoin has kind of been operating from the top down, hitting the internet and other people that are into Bitcoin and so forth. So I'm changing everything that we're doing and actually building a curriculum to bring Bitcoin to the local community here in Ensenada, Mexico, which I think is a perfect community for it. It's not going to be an easy task. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I think it can be done. So I'll read this, and then you can just comment on it. Menger wrote in Geld, 1909, that what is money for one people is not necessarily money for other peoples, and what previously was used to be money is nowadays often a commodity like any other. Every economic group or community can choose what their means of payment is. Free to choose. There's the old Milton Friedman.
That is the tricky part, that they were trying to say. For example, I was trying to explain to people what was money, and they were saying like, wait, this sounds a little too contextual. Like, you're saying that the just because the U.S. dollar is not accepted in Europe for payments, that means that it's not valuable. I said no. All it means is that it's not money in Europe. It's money in specifically the U.S. Well, northern Mexico. We all know that just because we're almost northern Mexico is almost part of the U.S. Northern Mexico, Cancun, mainly the tourist areas, and you're kind of like in the right track. And I was talking to some of my friends. I'm gonna do something similar in Spanish with Lunatic Coin. Some discussion that is similar to this one is border areas and tourist areas would usually tend to accept their local currency and the US dollar. There is where the dollar is money. In the US, border areas and tourist areas. And I think some areas of, for example, I think Guatemala, just spontaneously people started to accept US dollar, even if they're not in a tourist area, which is pretty interesting. I just found that a couple of weeks ago. So it's which one is the means of payment that people use on a daily basis. That's what we mean by money.
Yes.
And it can be more than one.
Yes. But when, the amazing thing is when you go across the border, sometimes I don't have anything but pesos. But you go across the border, I've never had a U.S. company they don't want it. They won't take the pesos from me. Now, no problem with the dollars in Mexico. Do you have that problem in Brownsville?
I love that example, and actually I give it to them to my students. Is in Matamoros, which is the border town, the Mexican peso and the U.S. dollar, their money, they're generally accepted mediums of exchange.
Tijuana, Ensenada, same thing.
Same thing. When you cross the border, usually they'll accept only dollars. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. I tend to call in that situation, the US dollar in Matamoros, or Ensenada, or Tijuana, it's a secondary money because the retailers or the sellers take it in, so they accept it. That's money. That's it. If it's generally accepted, like you don't even have to think. The point of money is, do you have to think about, I need to change my money, or I have to find someone that can accept it. If you don't even have to think about it, just go and buy stuff. Okay, that's what we mean by money. But it's secondary because the seller that receives the dollar in Tijuana or Ensenada does not use to pay its workers or its workers or I was going to say distributors, right?
Yeah.
It's suppliers.
Yeah.
It's suppliers. Therefore, there's a meaningful difference between what the peso is doing in Tijuana and Ensenada than what the dollar is doing. So there's a meaningful difference. But both are money because both are generally accepted in those areas. So the way that I distinguish them is by saying you have a primary money in that area and a secondary money that
Mexico, you can exchange pesos for dollars at a better rate than you can in the U.S. In fact, my wife and I used to go across on a motorcycle 2 or 3 times a day before Bitcoin and actually play the spread, with just a few $1,000s, and we could literally make about $200 a day.
Hello?
Yeah, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm talking about how in the border here in Tijuana and Rosarito and Ensenada. Now, when we live in Tijuana, it's too far. We're too far from the border now, but we used to go across between 2009 and 2013. We would kind of play the spread between the peso and dollar.
And I did the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a big advantage, and also Bitcoin tends to go for a higher price in Mexico than it does, on the world market. So, I think it's mainly because we're on the border. If it probably wouldn't be so true, it's because we have a better rate on the border than they do, in Mexico City.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. The dollar, right?
Yeah, I think it's mainly because of the dollar. But I
think it's higher demand.
Yeah, if you buy Bitcoin on Bitso, it's a higher price than buying it on a dollar market. Generally,
if you buy it in Bitso, it's more expensive.
Yes.
Than if you buy it with dollars in Coinbase US.
Well, or anywhere in the world.
I would probably say that, and this is my guess, right? That since the market's small in pesos to Bitcoin, we have what is called that market is less liquid. It has a larger or bigger as bit spread.
Right.
So it's that's what we call is less liquid. You cannot, if you buy and sell it right away, there's gonna be a meaningful difference in between, and you might gonna get a loss. A very liquid asset, you buy and sell it, and the difference is almost like minimum. But it's normal because it's still developing. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Okay, well, let's finish the article now. So I think I just got through every economic group of community can choose what their means of payment is. That's old Milton Friedman. They're free to choose. And the importance of community to the creation of money cannot be understated, but it often is. Money creation can happen either through a spontaneous order adoption, Gold is money again spontaneously in southern Venezuela, which I did not know, or through
We should do
bureaucratic state
a
negotiation.
podcast later on about that specifically.
All right, will you briefly explain? If we have time, we can do it now. Do you want to briefly
Okay,
explain that?
just the short version, so it doesn't take
Yeah,
us way too
we'll do it.
much, is that in the mining towns, historically speaking, in southern Venezuela, in the mining towns, um, it wouldn't be odd since the miners go to the mine, get some gold nuggets out, and sometimes they will not have enough time to change it for the local currency. Back in the days, el bolivar. Sometimes they will use it for payments, but it wasn't. Gold was used as a medium of exchange, but it was not money because it wasn't generally used on a daily basis. When the bolivar falls completely, inflation rates of my students and I were doing the math, and we were like, what? Even I was surprised. There were some years that they had 320,000% inflation
Wow.
in Venezuela. So the bolivar completely collapses, and everywhere else outside of southern Venezuela, specifically the state of Bolivar, outside of that, usually, for example, and the idea of the border is super important. The areas that were close in the border with Colombia, guess which one was the money that caught up right away? The Colombian peso. But boom, boom, real quick. The ones that were in the border close to Brazil, the Brazilian currency, I think they call it the real, caught up right away to the point that the unit of account for the border regions with Brazil in Venezuela, the unit of account is the Brazilian currency. Although they accept gold and they accept US. There are some towns in southern Venezuela, they have three monies running, being exchanged on a daily basis.
Wow.
So in the border towns, they're actually kind of close to, since this is the south, they're close to Brazil. In the border towns, they don't have the access to the Brazilian currency nor the Colombian currency. So they were saying, look, almost everyone in these towns know perfectly well how to recognize what's good gold and what's bad gold, even if they're in the raw yeah, if they're raw, if they're just a bunch of nuggets. So little by little, the retailers were saying, you know what, instead of giving me bolivars, just give me certain amount of weight to buy for your daily things, food, cleaning products, so on and so forth. Just give me the gold flakes. If there's a little bit difference with the little change, that's when they will use the bolivar. The bolivar is only used for the little exchange when you a couple of cents, when you give them a couple of. So they do use it, but it's kind of funny that it's only just for the little exchanges. So gold started to become money. That since the dollar started to be used everywhere else in Venezuela, because the areas close to Colombia, they were going to use the Colombian peso. The areas close to the border areas from Venezuela to Brazil, they were going to start using the Brazilian currency. What about the other areas? The only one that is culturally recognizable like this, and this is the tricky part for the Bitcoin community, is money is a social phenomenon. So it's super cultural. You want a community to use or someone to use Bitcoin as money, as a medium of exchange, and then it becomes generalized. You have to insert it in the history of that community. That's the tricky part. It has to become part of the culture. I'm kidding you not. No different than here in South Texas, Northern Mexico. Tacos are part of the culture. Also, the dollar and the Mexican peso are part of the culture. All my students know perfectly well about exchange rates because they and their family go back and forth, at least once a month.
Right.
So whatever we call money, you're discussing culture already. You're not discussing just a mechanical asset like, okay, I'm gonna invest in bonds from Walmart, bonds from Best Buy. It is an asset that is inserted in the culture of that community. That's the tricky part, and that's why I was focusing on community so that people understand we're talking about a social phenomenon. Therefore, within time, the areas that were very familiar with gold nuggets, started to accept it as money together with the dollar. Why? Because the dollar is so well known, so it's part of the history. It's culturally accepted or well known in Venezuela, just like in Argentina, which is pretty obvious, right? By now, they don't use euros; they use dollars. And so, how come? Oh, even when the dollar was evaluating more than than the euro. For Argentinians, which one's more familiar, the dollar or the euro? Even when the euro was more had a higher purchasing power than the dollar. Oh, the New Zealand currency usually has a higher purchasing power and holds better purchasing power than the US dollar, and the Swiss currency also does. Why do people still use dollars, although they don't? They're not such a good. They're store of values. They're good assets, but they're not the best ones, because what makes something money is how easily tradable it is, how inserted in the culture of your community it is. No different than I'm kidding you not. It sounds kind of odd. The type of food that your area eats that is so culturally specific, money is very similar to that. The cultural context tells you kind of determines what money is and what money is not for that culture.
I'm so glad and that's where you hit a home run with me, because this is what I see. And of course, I live in Mexico and I love the Mexican culture, although my Spanish sex, my wife is Mexican. I love the people here. They're far more polite. I feel safe in Mexico. I don't feel safe in the United States. So I feel safer in people, badmouth Mexico all the time, but I think it's propaganda. But
You need to know your way around, I guess.
yeah,
That's what it means.
yeah, well, it is, so basically that's my goal here, is somehow to bring this to where I live in Ensenada. And Ensenada is such a great town because it has a very diverse economy, and it's really not a border town. It's kind of the first town that you're getting into. Not a border town,
Oh, I get it. It's close enough. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
about an hour and
as
a
I told
half
you,
from.
I was raised in Monterrey, which is 3 hours from the border.
Right.
And even in Monterrey, people accept dollar unless there's sometimes they pass a law where you have to go exchange it first, and then you could say, okay, the dollar was during that period, the dollar wasn't money. But when they get rid of those regulations, and then everyone starts accepting dollars all over again. Why? Because one way or another, we're so close that you almost never struggle to make a payment with dollars
Right.
in Monterrey, although it's 3 hours away. You guys are 1 hour and a half, so that's
Right.
even more so.
Yeah, we're an hour and a half away, and of course, when we still get a lot of food. They actually dredge the bay here, and Ensenada is a cruise ship town. They have cruise ships come in here all the time.
Oh, nice.
There's really one or two or three. So, anyway, so this is, yeah, and this is so where my thing is. I hope that we can get maybe we can share. I have this shared vision where I want to get the basic teaching of Bitcoin down here in the border towns, because to me this is the low hanging fruit for Bitcoin. It's probably much easier than El Salvador, because we don't. Well, you don't have. Well, why do we need Bitcoin? We already have the dollar, because that's all they have is the dollar.
Areas where people are used to have more than one money, those are easy hanging fruit. Usually tourist areas. That's why I think that's a good one, right? Why in Salvador they're used to only one of them. They're not used to several ones. But for example, in Mexico, in every tourist area, they will be accepting pesos and dollars.
Oh, exactly.
Like in the border area. So those two options are, as you said.
But in El Salvador, the dollar is legal tender, so they don't have it competing against
anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although it's not illegal for them to use their local currency, they just got out of circulation, and then the dollar just took over, and so they're not familiar with using anything but US dollars.
I don't think. Do they have a local currency? I don't think.
They had colones. It's not illegal for them to use them, but I don't understand completely why is it that they completely stopped using them. But there was like a fixed exchange rate, so it didn't make any difference between one or the other. And they said, forget about it. We just use dollars, and they started to use it, which kind of makes sense, because when you have some of those small countries like Ecuador or El Salvador, if they have their own currency, they usually make a mess. The new politician starts messing around, so on and so forth. So it's just safer to just say, we're just going to dollarize and that's it. And actually, it is better. I mean, I know for Bitcoiners, listening to the idea of dollarizing is like, oh, you're using fiat. Well, guys, right now in the context that we are, the US dollar is the most liquid asset in the world. Everyone in the world pretty much is going to accept dollars as means of payment. And therefore, people need that to make payments. And what we're trying to do is for Bitcoin to become as close as possible to that level of liquidity, to that level of tradability.
I love
And
this
that's going to take
idea.
time.
I love this idea. You say the creation of money is like the evolution of language. Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
And then you go to create money, a network of people or a community. This is what you've been.
Oh,
It must
it's
be.
not precise, but it's contextual and it's social. So you're not going to have a money that is precise and perfect.
No.
Why? Because it depends upon people's idiosyncratic context, biology, regional environment. It depends also because it's very, very contextual to the area that we're discussing or to the group of people that we're discussing.
And here you hit a home run with me because, when everybody was so bullish, Bitcoin's legal tender down to El Salvador, Michael Saylor is putting Bitcoin into the legacy system. I wrote at the time, hey guys, this is not bullish, it's bearish. Well, I turned out, unfortunately, to be correct. But then you write that about the challenges to deliver it in San Salvador, and then you said it's not just the technological challenges, but the Bitcoin law was in fact made to use the Shiva wallet, which was
That's the
Bukele's.
key.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have this partnership again between the government and the private sector. I mean, they even gave 3 days' wages to jumpstart the system. I mean, it's
To
basically
jumpstart, not Bitcoin, but
that
Chivo wallet.
the Chiva wallet, and and Austrian economists should have known better. You know,
No, they knew better. I mean, the ones actually the ones that were not happy about this, including Nick, they were open about it. Said, you know what, guys? Actually, for example, Selgin, I remember they wrote about it. Said, the idea is not bad. The problem is that they made it mandatory. And when they make it mandatory, you look and say, oh, that's a little bit weird. Because even the idea of legal tender itself, that doesn't mean that certain asset, let's say you make, just to make things simple, silver legal tender. All legal tenders does is to say, if you have a debt, you can pay with that specific asset, let's say silver, and your lender has to accept it as means of payment. They cannot say, no, I don't accept silver or whatever. But it doesn't say anything about every other transaction. So everybody, there was a level of confusion to the max about what legal tender was supposed to mean. And therefore, to make their life simple, the Bitcoin law in El Salvador specifically said everyone has to accept it. They didn't even use the notion of legal tender. They actually just said it has to be accepted in every transaction. And then they put some, ifs and does and whatever. But at the end of the day, what you actually notice is, and some people kind of said, no. They're not really forcing people to accept Bitcoin. They're forcing people to accept the rails. I remember they said this. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, the rails for what? For Bitcoin or for Chivo tokens? That's exactly my case. Even when you have your Chivo wallet and you have it in Bitcoin, it's a debt denominated in Bitcoin that the government has with you. That's what that one is. It's not. They don't give you your keys if you have Bitcoin in your wallet. It's just a debt from the government. So that's just that's like a central bank.
How do you view then Lightning Network? Because
I heard good things about. I use it and it seems to work. It's like an extra layer 2.
Okay, so the problem was not the Lightning network at all. The problem it was they had a mandatory wallet. That was the issue.
No, Lightning Network was, if I'm correct, understand correctly, was the mandatory wallet is going to use Lightning Network to make, because the transactions are less expensive.
Right.
And therefore, I mean, Lightning Network has not. That's just Bukele saying, I'm gonna impose this, and I just happen to, since it's cheaper for me, I'm gonna be using the Lightning to make it simple for me. But yeah, the Lightning Network so far I know.
Well,
it's just a secondary layer.
Could they also use Strike, which is Jack Mallers' wallet?
That's the tricky part. As far as I understand, and this is where the whole thing got a little bit odd, it was, oh yeah, sure, you can use any other wallet, Moon wallet, anything, Strike. The cool thing about Strike, which they can use, is that if people want it in dollars, they can just switch it to dollars right there. and it's very simple and all that. It has its plus positives and negatives, but in general, Strike is pretty good. Actually, my critique of Chivo Wallet was using the pattern of Strike. And then, guys, look at Strike. And I remember at the beginning of last year, hopefully I can share with you the tweet. I showed because almost I showed what it would be a balance sheet of how Chivo Wallet was going to look like. And I say, guys, this is a debt, whether in Bitcoin or in dollars, but that's still a government debt, and you're not going to be completely sure about what's on the asset side because they're not going to be making loans. They promise you there's going to be the exact same amount of dollars in the assets than in the liability side, and the same amount of Bitcoins than in the liability side. But do you really trust a politician to, you know what I mean? So I said, guys, you gotta be very careful with this one because that whole thing, shenanigans at the end of the day was, we'll give you a certain amount of you said what, 3 days wages or something, for you to use what, Bitcoin? No, to use a Chivo wallet. That was the condition. And so all that information was inside of the government's in the government's layer. It wasn't even like a private thing. So that's why I was very concerned about it, because if they had got rid of Article 7, which was the one that made it mandatory, there would have been no problem whatsoever. I think almost everybody was okay with that. We thought, have you heard of Bitcoin Beach?
Yes, I have.
Okay. We thought that the problem was going to be like Bitcoin Beach, except in the whole nation. But Bitcoin Beach is not mandatory. It's, if you want to, we'll help you out, so on and so forth, which I think is fantastic. That Bitcoiners are going to communities and saying, look, guys, we're going to teach you how to earn Bitcoin, how to use Bitcoin, how to accept Bitcoin, so on. And actually, when it comes to money, I don't know about right now, but we were happy to say, oh, look, El Sonte is a community that accepts Bitcoin. Generally, wherever you go, usually you can make payments with Bitcoin in that community, that tourist community. And so that's where Bitcoin is money, in that community. Why? Because it's generally accepted. And the interesting thing, it was inserted by Bitcoiners. Culture of that community.
You've got an echo again. Like I say, I came to what you're writing about. I came to the same conclusion during this past year when I saw everything that's going on, and so I'm completely changing my focus. And so I'm just so glad that I found you. I really, in my view, we need to. Let me ask you this, because you would know. I really want to develop good Spanish content, and of course, I don't speak the language, and I know there's a lot of knowledgeable people out there. But is there anybody that's really doing a lot of good content in Spanish?
That I know of, the one that I trust the most, because he has earned my trust at every step of the way. It's a podcast in Spanish, Lunatic Coin. He is, so far I've seen, an absolute amazing podcast, outstanding in Spanish. Explains every detail. It talks about history. It talks about how Bitcoin works in the Lightning Network, how it works in chain.
Yeah,
it talks about
economics. Can you send me the link? Because it's called what?
Lunatic Coin.
Lunatic Coin. That's a terrible name, because when you talked about Luna, I said, what are you talking about? Isn't that the one that just went bankrupt?
Hey, that was his choice long ago. So, but he's he's originally from Spain. He's an excellent guy. He loves to learn. He loves Bitcoin. Whenever he's not sure about something, he's happy to come and ask questions to me and to the other economists that we have some type of expertise when it comes to monetary issues. It's an excellent person to follow. He's an expert on Bitcoin, and this is what I found very I found great about his program and his content is he will not just teach you what Bitcoin is, but he will teach you what is the history of money. For example, he had a whole podcast with some of my closest colleagues about, for example, the history of money in the U.S., the history of the gold standard. And you're talking about sometimes podcasts of an hour, sometimes podcasts of, I'm kidding you not, 3 hours, just trying to go. And its audience learn about how Bitcoin works, how to use Bitcoin, how to use Lightning Network. They learn economics, they learn even politics, and they learn history all in one place. It's an excellent resource. Everything that you guys can follow him in Twitter, and he has lots of stuff, and then we can kind of work. We can kind of work together. But he's
Okay.
highly recommendable.
Uh,
There you go.
there you
That's my
go.
friend Lunatico. He's amazing. Highly recommendable. Awesome podcast.
Wow, he's got a
Uh,
lot. He's got a lot of followers too. So this is
yeah,
great.
no, and the downloads, everything, because he does an excellent job. For example, something that some people were praising him for was that when there was some event in El Salvador and in Argentina, he went to both, to Argentina and El Salvador, and every other podcaster or of similar job, I guess, or uh, they were saying he was the only one that even when we were all having fun, partying or whatever, he was still recording for his podcast, trying to tell people what was going on, how Bitcoin was being used in Argentina, how Bitcoin was being used in El Salvador, so on and so forth. So I highly recommend his content because he honestly tells you, he tells you, I don't understand this. Can you please explain it to me so I can explain it to my audience? He's very open about it, very straightforward,
Well,
humble.
right. Well, that's why I try
Amazing.
and be because I don't claim to be the expert, and I do lean on you. I kind of get disappointed. Like I love George Selgin and Lawrence White. I've been fans of them since way back in the '80s when I was a young man because they were you don't know how lonely that was back then. They know.
That is so true, right?
When I got out of prison, I couldn't believe how many people had grasped on to Austrian economics because it was not, oh
Oh,
yeah, that
what year did you get out, if you don't mind?
2002, and
Oh yeah,
I
compared
went
to
and compared to 19, 89, a huge difference, a
yeah,
huge. And so is this guy, is he from Spain or what country does he live in? Uh,
as far as I know, he's from Spain. Yeah, he's originally from Spain,
okay, okay.
and so he has all of the Spanish speaking community listen to his podcast. He's
Yeah,
the one
because
who has the best stuff.
this is what we need to do. I want to build like a Bitcoin Standard Institute where people can come and just learn and sit and learn how to use Lightning Network. We're going to start using Azteco,
Have
and this
books,
would be
audiobooks
yeah, this
available.
would be perfect. So, and uh, Angel here can start listening to him, and I'll start listening to. That'd be a good way for me to. Yeah, you're right. If it's Bitcoin, I'd probably learn Spanish faster because I'm interested in I'm not interested in speaking Spanish, but I'm interested in Bitcoin.
There you go.
Amazing how that works.
And so that you know that what Spanish speakers can easily be exposed, what high quality information and content they're being exposed to. That's why it's good for you to listen. You're not gonna
Right.
understand everything, but you're gonna be okay. I'm
Right.
pretty sure.
That's my whole thing. I just don't want to be giving. That's why I wanted Angel to run by his program that he wrote. I said, because I don't speak Spanish, you need to run it by somebody that knows Bitcoin. And I know that you do and can trust. I want him to present his presentation to you and
Nice.
make sure we're on the right path. I really appreciate you coming on, and I really look forward to I am open to any ideas that you have.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to introduce myself and who I am, and what I do, and you know, I
I'm very happy that we got to meet. We got
yeah,
to
and
meet.
I just I mean
We'll continue to do content together.
I would really because I really want to develop this the local language, the Spanish end of it. I mean, this is where my heart and soul is. It's not we have. I mean, it's already been the gospel. The Bitcoin gospel has been presented to the United States enough. We need to reach out to other people. And I've always said, there's only two kinds of entrepreneurs in the world, and it's the entrepreneurs that have Bitcoin and the entrepreneurs that don't. And it's really the obligation of us entrepreneurs that have it to show the value of Bitcoin. That's going to be the fundamental sustained growth of Bitcoin, and it's going to be from that group. It has to be sound commercial banking will only develop when there's a creation of new wealth. And entrepreneurs
Yes,
are the only
that's it.
ones that create the new wealth. The problem that we have now is all this shitcoin banking. they're creating money and they're equating it with wealth. It's a perversion, and it's a moral issue as much as anything, I think.
All the other cryptos.
Yes. Well, the bank, Bitcoin banks essentially are the exchanges.
Oh, okay, that they kind of yeah. I usually tend to say that I understand why people say that, but they still don't make loans to. They don't affect the structure of production. Therefore, and this is where it gets tricky. Therefore, Bitcoin is not mixed, if you wish, with other liquid goods. The point, in order to make Bitcoin closer and closer to money or to increase its moneyness, is that it has to be daily exchange with other goods that are very liquid or very high on moneyness. And usually the ones that are the most traded goods tend to be consumer goods. Those are the ones that are traded on a
Exactly.
daily
And what
basis.
people don't understand, what I'm trying to teach, is that uh, sound commercial. You don't need to have a large hodl to develop sound commercial banking. What you need is just your the species that you issue has to be redeemable for real wealth.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Okay, there you go.
And so you can actually have offer vouchers that could be redeemable at places locally that have real wealth because they can be redeemed not just for Bitcoin, but they can be redeemed for a car wash or a bag of chips or whatever.
Whatever they sell in Ensenada, that's
Exactly, and this is the key, and you know the idea of 100% reserves. It's a warehousing operation. Bitcoin is never going to develop if it's just a warehouse
sitting
operation.
there.
If it's just sitting there, and boy, it's hard to get through these Rothbardians. Just, it's just they don't. It's like, you know, and that that's part of what this is over with Nick Carter, and Stephen Livera has kind of started it that Nick is very much opposed, which I'm in his camp, but he says, hey, Bitcoin has to be more than a warehouse operation. We do have to start
Yes,
banking.
yes. Nick is heavily influenced by Lawrence White.
Yes, and so am I. So,
Yeah,
but sometimes the intellectuals kind of make. I didn't know it, but we'll probably edit this one out. But George Selgin has never owned any Bitcoin or any of the private currencies.
I'm not sure because I know White has.
I don't think George has because he caught it. He was invited on a shitcoin broadcast, and I asked him what he had. I said, and I think I heard him say, I don't think he has any. Never has.
Now, now I'm gonna be. I mean, just so you understand my context. When Bitcoin barely came out, I have some of my closest friends. They were in Bitcoin since 2010 or even before.
Wow.
Close to how to say
Wow.
close to day zero, I guess. No, I did not get in because I wanted to understand it well beforehand, and I don't think I understood it well until, like, I'm talking about not well that you can transfer, or there's a try to understand the blockchain. The blockchain is easy to understand since forever. It was its connection, and is it really money? How is it going to work? Because I didn't want my monetary analysis of Bitcoin to be affected by, oh, I have money. Because I think that's what happens with a lot of people. One of the reasons why unintentional, I don't think it's intentional, unintentionally, because they're holding to Bitcoin, and what they want is what they're doing is investing, and they're thinking of having more Bitcoin having a higher price in the future. Therefore, when they talk about money, their focus is on what matters to me is the fact that it stores value and probably goes up. But that's not what money is. We're talking about something different.
Right.
And therefore, because I knew that was going to be a problem with that, I literally I waited for a lot of years until I said I need to perfectly understand really, really well so that me holding to Bitcoin does not affect my monetary analysis. Until I finally understood the connection between Bitcoin and money in every single detail that I could think about. Okay, now I can have it. So because from now on, my opinion is already pretty much, it already has a very strong foundation. and whatever extra is not going to let me confuse my desire for Bitcoin to be more expensive, obviously, so that I can sell at a higher price, um, with whether Bitcoin is functioning or not functioning with money. What does it have to do? What it doesn't have to do, and so on and so forth. That's why I haven't. Well, I stayed long time without holding to without buying Bitcoin. Well, I mean, I did buy so that I could know how it worked, right? But
Right.
I didn't hold to anything as savings, as an asset. Now I do, but because now I feel comfortable saying, okay, now I understand the ins and outs, and most importantly, its relationship um, to a monetary system. How is that going to work?
It takes a long time. I mean, I was, of course, in gold, and so I'd heard about Bitcoin when it first started. I heard about it when it went above uh, uh, $1, and then of course, when the Cyprus thing happened, I was aware of it, but it wasn't until August of 2013 that I finally did the digging.
Oh, there you go.
And I was up. I couldn't sleep for 2 days because I was just studying one thing after another. Couldn't figure out where to buy it. And Coinbase had just come on, and so, but when I got it, it clicked. Now I didn't get it all right. I mean, it took me a long time. I don't know if you know this, but uh, in the competition of currencies and denationalization of money, Hayek never envisioned a bunch of private currencies competing with one another. Now, initially, that's what I thought. So I bought all these other coins too, focusing on Bitcoin. But Hayek actually wrote a piece in 1986. I'll send it to you, where he only saw as one private standard, and that's why he called it the standard. Uh,
I'm
and
so glad you let me know.
Yeah, I'll send you the article that he wrote because I knew him personally, and actually the article has a picture of one of my coins on it. It
Oh,
appeared in some libertarian magazine, and I'll send you the article because you have to. It's a very obscure article.
you got to hang out with him in the 80s?
Yeah, he invited me to the Mont Pelerin meeting in
Yeah,
Madrid
yeah.
in 1980. So
Oh, he was 8. Okay, there you go.
that
There
was
you go. Okay, 80s.
1980 when he either contacted me in 79 or 80 because I had
Yeah, yeah.
started minting private gold coins, and so I was getting a reputation in
Okay.
in the gold standard circles.
Oh,
And
nice.
and of course then he came out with denationalization of money at the same time, and of course
Yeah.
I was doing what he was writing about. So that was the connection. I'm the C
Yeah.
student. I'm
That
not.
that that um that article might be super important because one of the critiques done to denationalization of money was precisely say like, wait, look, money is a network good, so it doesn't mean that it has to be only one, but usually you're gonna be seeing only one type of money, maybe two. Extreme cases like the one of southern Venezuela, certain towns will have three, but because of a network good, like um very similar, for example, and just I hope this makes sense to you guys. The importance to understand money as a network good is most of you guys know that in the United States we don't use WhatsApp at all. It's
Right.
just
It's a
that's
Mexican
not part.
thing, right?
Well, no, that's a world thing.
Oh, it's a world thing.
Because
Okay.
in Europe they use everybody except I don't know about Canada, but in the United States we don't use it. So when my
What do we
friends
use? What does the United States use? They just use their cell phones, right? Or their
for
phone.
texting, my students tell me that they just text from their phones because there's US texting was very inexpensive compared to the rest of the world since a long time ago. So something similar to WhatsApp was never needed. So people haven't even added themselves to it. I don't know if they text each other. There's nothing major because so the texting is always available. I still use WhatsApp now, but the point is when my friends from Monterrey, from Mexico, open up a WhatsApp group. They say, "Hey, we're gonna add you up," and I said, I don't even know what WhatsApp is." And then we got into WhatsApp and whatever. And honestly, and it was kind of cool because we got all the memes and all, totally stuff. I really don't like. I don't follow soccer all that much, but I have to follow Mexican soccer for the memes, so I understand them. Although I really don't care much for Mexican soccer. Well, international soccer maybe. But I hate it with all my heart that it didn't have certain features like liking a meme, like you're in a group in WhatsApp and you cannot just like something. you have to like answer and then say yes or whatever. It was kind of weird. I didn't like the fact that I couldn't do things like that you could do, let's say, in Facebook, that you could do in Twitter, whatever. But I still continue to use it. Why would I use a network, something like WhatsApp, that I really didn't like? Because it's not, when we're talking about network goods like money, social media, even phone companies and things like that, what matters, it's not the quality of the network, that's secondary. I mean, it's not that it's not unimportant, but it's secondary. What matters the most in network goods happens to be who's using that network so that you can interact with them. Right. So that's why, for example, Twitter right now, they're trying to compete against Twitter. The main thing against going for Twitter is that even the ones that really want to get out of it, when they get out of it to another network, there's only a certain amount of people. They don't have any interaction with people outside of their small circles. And usually Twitter is so that you can have interaction with almost an unlimited amount of people in your circles. So it doesn't matter, the quality becomes secondary. Now, if they improve the quality, that's great, right? But the primary thing on a network good, which includes money, is not the quality of the network itself or the asset. It's who is actually using it. And therefore, just because Bitcoin has a lot of amazing features, that's not enough to become money. We need people. Remember, historical, cultural context. Bitcoin has to be inserted into the history of a community, into the history of an economic group, so that those are the people that attract more people into the network.
Okay, we do have some members that are present, so I want to address their questions, and they want to get your thoughts on the Bitcoin dominance right now. And here's Rentable says BTC dominance is irrelevant. There are thousands of shitcoins, and there's no way they are worth their market cap. It's only very tiny positions that are traded for all these scams. So can you give me your thoughts on Bitcoin dominance? And meanwhile, I'm going to try and find this article on Hayek so I can relate it to you, because it's basically Bitcoin is the standard according to F.A. Hayek. And I'll send you that link. And
please give me
so if you can answer our question,
okay,
they want your thoughts on Bitcoin dominance.
If I understand your point about Bitcoin dominance, it is kind of like the first mover, and therefore everyone in the crypto world, whether in the crypto everyone in the crypto world recognizes Bitcoin, but not everybody in Bitcoin network recognizes most or any of the crypto of the other crypto coins. Bitcoin has the first mover advantage, and since it's a network and everybody's already using Bitcoin, the other coins are going to have always a super difficult time competing against Bitcoin. Let's say you could come up with a better cryptocurrency than Bitcoin by its properties. That's not enough, because historically speaking, Bitcoin already has a bunch of people using it compared to the other coins. So it has a huge advantage. As someone has been saying, there's still going to be tons of little small coins and whatever, but they really don't do anything to, even if they were high quality, which that's the big question, and I never bothered to look into details. But even if there were some type of high quality by their properties, they still have a disadvantage against Bitcoin, because everyone in the crypto community accepts Bitcoin or uses Bitcoin or holds to Bitcoin. And a lot of people in the Bitcoin community does not necessarily use any at all of the other crypto coins. Now, that's great for Bitcoin in the crypto universe, if you wish. But that's the challenge for Bitcoin to become money at a large scale.
Exactly.
Because you're competing not against the 8% inflation, which is really bad, obviously, of the US dollar. You're competing against their network. Their networks, just for you guys to imagine how big it is, and people get it, which is, I noticed that it's a good example. It is, let's say Chinese and a Mexican are doing international trade. They could, theoretically speaking, the Mexican buys something from a Chinese seller, he can send pesos, switch them for yuans, and then the Chinese person receives yuans. For everybody would say, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It is less expensive internationally to switch pesos to dollars then send dollars, and then switch them to yuans. Two transactions are than less expensive in the US network, USD network, in the dollar network, than in the yuan to peso network, only one transaction. Why? Because there's millions and millions and billions of transactions that two added to that, it's the marginal cost is so minute compared to, let's say, there's very few transactions that go pesos to yuans and yuans to pesos. So one transaction by itself is a huge percentage out of the entire network. Therefore, this is what we call, to get the two ideas that go together, is economies of scale and network effects. The network effects of the US dollar are huge, very similar to the network effects of Bitcoin. Every other coin that's going to try to compete against crypto coin is going to try to compete against Bitcoin. It's in a huge disadvantage because the amount of people that are using network and they're familiar with they're using Bitcoin network, it's already so big that it's actually very difficult to try to convince everyone to start moving to the new network because everybody's already used to it. And there's a bunch of examples of that whenever we have the time. Network goods that is difficult for even the free market economizes, but it does not necessarily chooses always the nicest network good.
Now, why I have such a respect for Hayek is Hayek recognized this before Bitcoin even existed. He recognized that when private money existed, it would boil down to not competing private monies, but one private money. And again, here's my article that I relate to, where I do a study of the gold standard and how it worked in California and why that was such a unique situation. It was a very thorough, and that was really why Roger Vere's Bcash is stuck at Sutter's Mill. And because they actually had 100% gold standard, that was they had no other. They traded gold.
That was the problem with Bcash, right?
Yeah,
the Bcash wanted to do something similar to 100%, and
yeah,
that's just
yeah.
Economically
Right.
impossible.
Right. So for this reason, it is okay. It's important to distinguish Bitcoin from crypto. I'm a Bitcoin standard bearer. I'm not. I don't care if I've ever. There's a. I think Corey Clipston said, "Why isn't anybody in Bitcoin in the CoinDesk top 50?" Well, I'm not in the. I don't care about the other coins. Hopefully I'm in the. I want to be in the Bitcoin top 50, not the CoinDesk. And Bitcoin alone is the blockchain. It stands alone, and all other wannabes are crypto. And those promoting crypto are not friends of Bitcoin if they ride on the Bitcoin coattails. And it's time for maximalists to stop pretending otherwise. And it's really I'm not a maximalist because it's really a non sequitur. It implies there are viable alternatives to Bitcoin. There is no viable alternative to Bitcoin. It is not a label developed. It is not a label developed within the Bitcoin community, but it's a label penned by Vitalik Buterin to vilify those who support Bitcoin alone and warn against the dangerous monetary policies introduced by Ethereum. And we embraced it as a badge of honor. There's a name for it. I have the highest respect for Giacomo Zucco. He's my good friend, and he's
I usually say you can be as maximalist as you want as long as you're not toxic.
All right. Okay. And so, at any rate, and like Knut, he wrote, says most people in the crypto get the idea that peer-to-peer money, but not the idea of sound money that truly makes it unique. Bitcoin was not invented not only with a double spend prevention mechanism on board, but as an antidote to double spending as a whole. Double spending, which includes counterfeiting and therefore inflation. But here's the big one. This is the article and we were in this middle of discussion, and then I remembered an obscure article. It was written many years ago. It took me a long time to find it. It's copyrighted. It cost me $6 just to look at it. It's $38 to download it. But in April '86, there's an article entitled "Market Standards for Money." F.A. Hayek refined his thinking of his notable work, Denationalization of Money, and he suggested that a private store of value, and he called it the standard. He called it the standard, would be likely to overcome the political obstruction of the wholesale denationalization of currencies, but would be immune from use as a political tool. And let's see if I can make this big. Now, I quote it. You'll have to go find it online. There's a
Yeah,
link
yeah.
to it there. But it's almost like Hayek anticipated the current situation, and he wanted to make clear that free market money, like the gold standard, will succeed from competition on one accepted standard, not a competition on what the standard might be. Hayek, he envisioned an index of a basket of commodities. That was his view when he first wrote the book. And he thought that would be the emerging standard because it would have an implicit stability as a store of value from the get-go. He even named it. He said the ideal name for the new unit of account, clearly making its function universally intelligible, would be the proverbial standard. A rather obvious name, which, however, has so far never been used as the designation of a particular monetary unit. So it's the standard. And so that's why I say there's a difference between the gold and the gold standard. There's a difference between Bitcoin and the Bitcoin standard. Two different things. People have a hard time grasping it. But even with such implicit stability,
Bitcoin standard will mean that debts will be denominated in Bitcoin, not that there will be no debts.
Right, it's a redeemability factor.
Redeemability.
It's a redeemability factor, which Timberlake and you have to not just have the self-liquidating commercial paper, the real bills doctrine, but it also has to be tied to a redeemable commodity. And so here's Hayek.
That was Selgin's critique of an extreme version of the real bills doctrine that a lot of the extremers were saying, no, you don't even need redeemability. And they were saying, no, because you need to redeem, because that the base money that you're using, that is the most liquid asset.
Yes.
If you divorce the debts from the most liquid asset, you make the debts less liquid. The reason why they're so liquid is because
and Timberlake showed that you don't want to have fixed reserves. You don't want to have a fiat reserve requirement. That's what led to the Depression, because the banks, they required more gold reserves when they should have been letting the gold out.
Yeah, I know for sure in 37 they raised the even after we were trying to get out of the recession. By 37, they raised the reserve requirement, and therefore lending collapsed. And so it was like a double dip.
Right. That's what they don't understand. So it seems probable that for a long time, the use of such a common international unit of exchange at least be used chiefly in wholesale or other large transactions. Although, he said this way back in 86, although including also much expenditure on travel. Duh, what's Bitcoin being used for? This is where we're at right now. He, as a monetary theorist, he saw this. And he died before Bitcoin ever existed. I do not contemplate the standard will be used as a pricing in retail trade. For local business, coins and notes, and even some checks or credit cards, a local currency may well remain indefinitely preferred. But I would anticipate that once such a unit exists, it will become increasingly the unit of long-term business contracts. Contracts will begin to be made in standards. The future value which I suggested in denationalization of money, that gradually the courts would come to interpret all contracts as intended to be expressed in a stable monetary unit, so the difficulty of uncertain value of contracts disappears. And the emphasis is all in the original. So, I mean, he never foresaw this idea of a competing currencies competing against each other. He saw one currency and basically banking competing. We developed the market on that standard.
As far as I know, he would have just, and very wisely, by the way, changed his view, because at the beginning he was like, well, company, because I think what he foresaw in the nationalization of money would be that companies, I'm guessing, like let's say Walmart, they will create their token, which is like an equity token, and then people will start using it because you can actually use it to make payments in that company itself. Now, this is a more developed view that is, if you ask me, so far I can understand from the little that I've just saw, what Hayek is saying says he's accepting tacitly that money is a network good, And so at some point, there's going to be need for one standard alone as point of reference, although locally you can have different currencies going back and forth, which is very interesting because there were critiques for against Hayek for not recognizing the network good. And this one actually helps that to see that for sure he actually corrected himself, or at least he emphasized what he didn't emphasize in the nationalization of money.
Well, that's what I saw. And when I remembered that article and I remember what he said, that's when I sold my Ethereum. I said, you know what? Bitcoin's the competition's going to be on Bitcoin. The competition, what we need is just the one standard, and the standard is going to compete with the government monies. And this is why.
And the other thing is, Bitcoin is not created or issued by a private company.
No.
So therefore, it is a very different issue. Which that's what I think it was how Hayek was going towards later on. He said, okay, it was going to be private competition among companies,
right,
with tokens, and later on he said, oh, I think because of the network effects, what was probably going to happen is going to be there's going to be one around. And interesting as it is, despite the fact that it's one alone, Bitcoin does not depend upon one company. It just depends upon the community that is using it, which is it's a very different phenomenon. That's why it's interesting.
Exactly. And so, this is when I got completely off of the crypto world and the idea of trying to come up with an alternative to Bitcoin.
I like to watch the crypto world just because sometimes they come up with some experiments that for economists, we find them interesting, but that's different than saying, oh yeah, I recommend you guys to invest in certain cryptocurrencies or whatever, because honestly, I don't have any interest on the investing side of the issue. But it's actually kind of interesting to see how they, how in the crypto world, for example, the stable coins, for economists like me, monetary economists, we find them very fascinating because what a lot of these stable coins, the ones that are more prominent, what do they have in there? Because those ones are closer you get to, the closer you're going to get to a bank. What do they have as assets? Short-term commercial paper. And when there's a crisis, sell it, cover their debts.
Exactly. I didn't even think you, but you're right. They all have short-term commercial paper, and that's what makes it work for them.
And so the assets are so strong that even, I think, which is the strong, if I'm correct, the strongest one will be USDC. That one, there was a moment that it was, instead of passing at par, it was passing above par. So that meant that there were some people that trusted it so much they didn't mind paying a fee as long as they could hold to USDC, which is a debt. They're not dollars themselves. It's a promise. It's a dollar debt. And there were some people saying, no, I don't mind. I'll pay a little bit extra as long as I can hold to it. What's going on behind it? Well, there's such a strong assets on the asset side instead of the liability side that everyone that knows USDC enough knows that anything goes wrong, those assets are there backing the whole operation. Even I can even pay a little fee to get it. That's where commercial bank. Those are the little experiments or events, phenomena that economists, monetary economists like me would say, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. Now, I'd never hold to USDC because it's not my thing, but it is interesting to see it happen in real time.
Right. No, I've never held it either, but I understood its value. In fact, of course, I also grew up in the 1980s when we had the 20% interest rates, and I remember when I was in the gold business, sometimes I would have large dollar deposits, and I was actually paid between 10 and 12% overnight.
Wow.
Buying for commercial paper.
Oh.
Yeah, I was buying commercial paper overnight. I mean, you'd buy it at night and sell it the next day, and I'd make a couple $100.
Wow. Yeah, I can see it. It makes sense.
And which you can't do today. I mean, maybe you can now a little bit in the commercial paper now since the interest rates have gone up, but back in the day, yeah. But you couldn't have done it 6 months or a year ago at all. It was possible. But I'm sure commercial paper's coming back with a vengeance. If
I've been trying to tell people to, how to say, so a lot of people say that there's not enough safe debts, and I usually point to, okay, you guys have to include not just U.S. or U.S. government or German government debt in there. Obviously, the market sees them as super safe, which kind of make sense. They will pay you euros, they will pay you US dollars. But high quality commercial paper should, without a problem, be seen as a safe investment for from everyone.
Incidentally, I love your background. Is that a green screen background or is that? Is it
Yes,
okay?
yes.
It's really
Yeah.
very impressive. I like it.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So
I have several ones. I'll try to show you later on the other ones.
okay, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope I've learned a lot from you, and
I'm glad.
I hope I've enlightened you a little bit from my,
No, you give me such a great information.
you know, and I'm so happy that not only you're a Bitcoin but you're a Christian. It's just like I hit a home run, man, when I found you, and it's just,
We both did.
yeah. So, at any rate, looking forward to doing more stuff. I'm at a loss right now. How I read what you say and I agree with it, but and so as a practical man, I say, okay, I see what needs to be done. Now, how do we do it?
Yes, that I will. If you want me to come back later on, I'll come back to explain the Austrian structural production and the levels of liquidity by each stage of production and how Bitcoin should be inserted in those stages so that it gains liquidity or moneyness over time.
Okay. Now, my next question, of course, we've done this one in English.
Yeah.
I don't want to double work you.
Okay.
But do we really want to do this in English anymore, or do we want to develop this in Spanish? As an expatriate, I see the opportunity here and not in the United States. I don't. Maybe you can answer this question to me at your border down is it Brownsville? Here in San Ysidro, they actually have the kiosk built where they're going to check. You're not going to be able to leave the United States without permission. Did you know that?
You're not in San Isidro,
I'm in San Ysidro.
and they don't let you get out of the United
No,
States?
they have kiosks built with the arms coming down where they're going to, right now you can freely drive from the United States into Mexico. Mexico checks you, but the United States does not check you out.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But the kiosks are built in San Ysidro, in Tijuana, with the computers and everything. It's just a matter of giving the order, and you're not going to be able to go into Mexico till you've cleared the United States.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
I
yeah.
haven't seen
Oh,
that.
yeah. I tweeted it out. I sent a picture of it.
Oh, okay. That's good to know because I live in the border. So
Well, I'm asking
gonna
you, are they rebuilding things? Have you seen, do you have that come? They haven't done that in
I haven't
Brownsville
seen it. I haven't
Okay.
seen it.
Well, it'd be when you go and drive into Mexico before you go to the Mexican customs, but there's nothing there yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Okay. Because it's very disconcerting to me. I've always said that the wall is being built to keep Americans in and not to keep Mexicans out.
If that wasn't the intention, they'll try to use it one way or another. So the original intentions, actually Hayek was that what matters in social sciences, it's to study not the intended consequences, but the unintended consequences.
Yeah. Well, that's
good. You notice I'm Hayekian, right?
Yes.
You notice how Hayekian I am,
yes,
right?
yes, unintended. And that's exactly what it is. It's the unintended consequences of this.
Those are the interesting ones.
Oh, man, this is going to be great. So, well, I just want to give you that thought because, I mean, you're Mexican living in
Mexican American.
but you're Mexican. You're a U.S. citizen, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my dual citizenship. I want to be both, but
yeah, I'm dual. There you go.
Okay, and that's what my goal is. So, and right now, like I'm a resident of Mexico, and so
yeah, you want to get your residence as soon as possible. Citizenship as soon as possible.
Yeah, I do.
Shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, it is going to be hard. So that's why I'm not looking forward to it. My wife and I are legally married in California, but we haven't had the ritual in the civil ceremony in Mexico yet. But
you don't need it, as far as I know.
Okay.
As far as I know, you don't need it.
Okay. All right. Man, this has been great. So glad to get to. How old are you?
40.
40? Oh, you don't look that old. So,
oh, nice. Thank you.
So, I'm just want to give you my salute and and encouragement. And I want to, you know, want to work with you. The Bitcoin isn't really for me. It's for you guys. It's for you, and you know that. I mean, it's for my
For the fifth
children.
generation.
Yeah, it's for this generation, and I'm just glad
And
I'm
the
here.
generations to come.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. We will edit this and send it out, and looking to do more. And let me know. Like I say, I'd like to get your thoughts of which way we should go on this. I mean,
Yeah. Let's say in a month, we can do an English version of what I told you about the teaching a little bit of Austrian economics when it comes to the structure of production and how Bitcoin goes in there. And then from there, we'll work out some things in Spanish, which it shouldn't take that long.
okay. Yeah, and
Sounds
you can
good?
do it at your leisure. We can sit here and record it. We've got everything here.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to come visit anytime. We have you can stay with us. Do you have a family? Are you married? Do you have
Yes.
children? How many children do you have?
No, I have children, but
No children. Okay.
yeah, I adopted one older and all that. So, but
Okay.
I only have I'm married. I'm here in South Texas.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a kids problem that I can't leave. Yes, I can. I can move around.
Well,
as much
kids,
as-
yeah, but kids are welcome down here. So I mean,
Oh, that's pretty nice.
I have I have two families. My grown sons are in their 40s, and then I've adopted 4 Mexican children here too. 3
Oh,
from
that's
my
so nice.
ex-wife.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate it.
you know what? It keeps me young. It gives me purpose. You know.
Yes.
I mean, who knows what I'd be doing if I didn't have a family to provide for.
Be fruitful and multiply and replenish and I always forget the word dominion. And take care of God's
have
earth.
dominion
And one of the
over
most
it.
important things to have lots as much as kids. Now, and I usually tell my students, when I tell you guys to have a lot of kids, I don't actually mean you having a lot of kids. You can either adopt other kids, help your friends and family raise their kids, and be the best uncle ever, and be the great influence in their lives. Which every Mexican family has 2 or 3 uncles that are a tremendous. They probably didn't have any kids, but they're a tremendous influence on all the cousins from that family. But it is having kids and having influence on the younger generations that does help us fulfill the cultural mandate.
Yep, I agree. So, we're looking forward to it, man. Thank you so
Okay.
much for coming
So,
on.
see, we'll stay in contact. Please send me the article from Hayek, because that one is very interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and it's very obscure.
Yeah.
And it was written in
I believe you when you said it, I was like, yeah, that's
1986 is when he wrote it, which was 5 or 6 years after denationalization, where he
Wow.
was developing his concepts. And he
That's
called
so
it, he said, this is why I tried to change it. In my book, I say, well, this is why, and I think Satoshi's going to win, but my suggestion was that we develop a standard, which is
That's it.
100, I call it a standard 100 Satoshis.
Satoshis?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It would be one standard, but that's just my dream.
The market will take care of the rest.
No, yeah, it does. It's fine if it's Satoshis, but and that's my next thing too. Is I'll send you my books, and they'll be
Thank
I had an autographed copy of the first edition of Denationalization of Money, and I went to prison. All that was gone. That was one of my one of my real big treasures from F.A. Hayek.
I know.
So
That's so cool.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
See you over the week.
Oh, and what
on Telegram, and then
Yeah.
we'll continue to do
Right.
plans.
But we do edit this, and the one thing that I do want to do is I want to teach you how to do the ugly old goat dance. And so this is what we do. And so as part of the fun, you go hodl, hodl, hodl. Say hodl, hodl, hodl.
Edit it out, right?
No, this is going to be...
No. Because I will be taking away, like attention from you. You're the one that does it, and you does it really well.
Right,
You need to
but
get
when
the
when I do it, I want people to join in with me. So
It's
if you want
it's a
it
social phenomenon.
out, we'll edit it out. But this is part of the good part. It goes hodl, hodl, hodl.
Hodl.
Save, save, save.
Save.
Build a, build a, build a.
What is it? Builder?
Builder, builder,
Builder?
builder, builder,
What is that? That part I don't
building.
understand.
Okay, and then okay, the hodl, you know,
Huddle, huddle, save.
builder,
What is that?
build, biddle,
Just build something.
biddle. Yes, but it's biddle.
Biddle, okay.
They're all misspelled words. Builder.
Okay, I get it.
Biddle. Okay.
Biddle, yeah.
Biddle. Sound money.
Sound money?
Sound money. Now
Sound
notice
money.
it's not Bitcoin. It's sound money.
Yeah, whichever one does it. That's
But, so Bitcoin is sound money, but there could be another one. I think gold's sound money, so that's why it's sound money. Now hodl, of course, you know what hodl is. We hodl. If we hodl, we're savvy because we hodl, right? So save is a bastardization of savvy.
Okay.
Save. What that means, if you hodl long enough, then you can later on buy things like the studio or other things, reward yourself. Save is rewarding yourself. Build is what we're doing now. We're building on the Bitcoin network through education.
nice.
So this the whole I tried.
You're building the Bitcoin, the social phenomenon,
Yes.
not just the asset.
Yes. So it's not just hollow, because if we're just hodlers, Bitcoin, I think keep him, don't you see it? I said, it might be worth something for your children, but you really, that's it. So we have to not just hollow, but you have to save, you have to reward yourself, and then you have to build on it.
Something that I discussed with Lunatic Coin before is my interpretation of HODL is not that you shouldn't spend your Bitcoin, is that you shouldn't sell it for fiat. You should try to hold to it and use it for payments as much as possible. That's my interpretation of HODL. It's just don't sell it for fiat because you decapitalize the Bitcoin market.
Okay.
But we can use Bitcoin for payments and all that kind of stuff. That's my interpretation of HODL, because it would make no sense to say never spend it. Well, then you're never going to have a network. So
I'm glad
it's never going to be a social phenomenon.
I'm glad you explained lunatic, because when you said, when you first said, is this guy in the Luna? What does he mean by Luna? And that's a
Lunatic Coin.
Oh, yeah.
He likes that. I don't understand what.
So, but no, I get it. And I just want to make sure that we understand the distinction. But anyway, I really appreciate you coming on. I hope we can do a lot more together. I have introduced you to Angel here, who is studying under me, and you can help him so much.
Un gustazo, Angel.
So, do you want to come here and talk? Do you want to talk to him a little bit?
You need to end the live.
Okay, we'll end the live stream, and then he'll come over here and talk to you a little bit.